All right, here we go. Turn 4. It's the Eastern Front. The Germans shipped in some troops and they used the replacements and actually put most of the replacements over here on this side of the table and kind of threw some hodgepodge units and railed them into different areas and marched some out of the forts. And marching out of the forts, they did take with the cavalry Lutz and some infantry. So they took that major city from the Russians, and they did have a combat here against some cav. And the Germans did lose one unit here in the combat trying to take out some cav. The Russians had to basically exchange right there. There was no other combat around here. The Austrians, they railed in some of their best units to here because they're eyeballing wanting that back for that city. There was a massive combat that happened here. They did take out some Russian troops here, but they had a half exchange, so they had to lose some troops in the process, but they kicked the Russians this way. So now the Russian forces are here. It's actually looking pretty good at the moment for the Central Powers over here. The troops that didn't get shipped out here in Serbia did march south and took out the Serbian unit that was in this city. So the Serbs are down to the one city left. So they got one replacement point this turn that will be happening. They got a garrison here. So that's what's happening down in Serbia. Over here on the western front of the bloodbath, the Germans did take kind of a breather since they took a major hit the last month. They took the reinforcements, built another unit, Army Corps here, filled it in. Over here, they had their troops. They moved some troops around for garrison forces here. They got garrisons here, and then they marched up here, and then they had a big battle right here against some French units, and there wasn't a half exchange that happened here, and the Germans lost some troops out of it. And so now they do have this big gap right here that they can probably take advantage of if the French don't fill the gap. And it's probably looking at, once again, where it's going to have to be, where the French are going to have to start shifting troops down the line to, it's like, instead of the 3 stackers, they're going to be 2 stackers because they have to fill this in, plus whatever replacements they get. They haven't lost a major city yet, but that time may come yet. It's hard to say, but right now, the Germans are looking pretty good across this area. It looks like they're building up for an offensive. They moved the big siege guns into here. Looks like this fort may be what is that? Verdun. The big siege guns have parked outside of Verdun now. So that may be a problem right there. So you never know what's going to happen. Or else I could shift this siege gun to here, this one to here, and then this fort may be in trouble. So it's hard to say what's going to happen, but when you see forts and you see siege guns, well, the siege guns are what takes out forts. Because right now, you have a -2 to your die roll for attacking that fort complex. Here you got another -2, but for each siege gun you throw in, you get a +1. So that gives you a net effect. If you have 2 siege guns, well, you're going to have a 0 effect, so it's whatever you roll up. And that can make a big difference. So there we go. And I wouldn't be surprised if the unit here swings around and they start eating the corners right here. It's hard to say. Because the unit gets shipped here, this one shipped here, and you end up with a 3 or 4 army groups on one. That's calling for disaster for any unit. So the French need to plug units into here to stop that getting the corners, because this is the game of corners. Anytime you can get 3 army groups on one, like 1, 2, 3 on one, that's a major advantage, because that's looking at 3-to-1, even possibly 4-to-1 odds right there. And if you throw another army group on the corner, so you got 4, you're looking at possibly 4, maybe 5-to-1 odds. You can't allow that to happen, so you got to cut those corners off. And which is one of the reasons why the French haven't gone into this spot, because if they move up, then it's 3, you got 3-to-1 odds against whatever's parked there, and that's not good. So it's to their advantage not to go in there. That's just asking for units to get slaughtered. So they, at least the top generals, are thinking, oh, that's not a good idea to go in there. You know, so they're willing to give up a little bit of French territory to stay alive. All right. I think that's everything that happened for the Central Powers turn. We'll move on to the Allied turn 4. All right, here we go. Turn 4 with the Allied powers. Nothing happened on the Eastern Front. The Russians did, though, rail up a bunch of new troops and raise new troops. So basically, the armies that were here, they fell back, organized themselves into a small group right there. They did raise some troops here, railed up an army group here. You know, they're forming a nice little line right through here. And then they moved up their troops right here, forming another line through here, and railed up with reinforcements. And back here, there's some cav that's slowly creeping their way to the front. When you run out of rail capacity, well, cav makes really good just to wander by themselves. Eventually, they'll get to the front. And so that's it. So they'll probably get railed up next turn, because you can only build so much stuff. And I think they've denuded it. Yep, everything else has been cleaned out. So no more Russian troops except for those 2. So they'll probably get railed up next turn. And so they got to organize themselves. It's probably one of those deals where they got to organize themselves. The Russians need to. And they got territory to give up without losing any real good. They might lose Warsaw, possibly. That's not really a big deal, per se, I have to say. It's just one replacement point they're going to lose. So eventually, you know, their big strength is territory. They have lots of places to fall back to and rebuild. And my previous experience, the Russians can win this game if they just hold out long enough. And eventually they got to put pressure on the Germans. But at the moment, with the casualties they took, well, they can't do that at the moment. Serbians built 1 unit here. And looks like it's going to take 2 turns for it's going to take them 2 turns to get to here before. So in 2 turns, they'll build up enough strength possibly to protect themselves. And over here on the Western Front, the French did some rearranging, moved troops around, and also got some troops come in from the replacement troops. Moved troops along the line, stretched. They're getting stretched thin. I don't think anybody is. The only place I think this one's the only one that has 3 in it. Everybody else is now 2s. And the British have some troops up here in the northern part of France. And they have another army group that can fill the gap here or fill in the gaps elsewhere. So they're doing pretty good at the moment. And let me tell you, you don't really mess with the British. It's easier to kill the French if you're the Germans and then surround them and then cut them off that way. Because when you're looking at these guys, these are the best troops in the game, the British. And you're looking at 27 defense right there. That's pretty good. It takes a lot of firepower just to equal 1 to 1. And hope that you get a good die roll. So, there you go. Alright. So that is it at the moment. That's the end of October. And we'll move on to turn 5, November 1914. Alright, so we'll be back.